what is there in Alaska, and learning that they are actually paid, to live there. So that was very nice.
Kelly, you're not paid to live in Alaska.
It's true. Yes.
Okay.
So thoughts came into me that maybe I might also be paid.
You always look for something that makes you understand, okay, I'm not in Boston, I'm not in a big city, but I will find it bearable living there. Yeah.
So that was now my journey to Alaska.
But I also like to agree with Sandy where he said that the movies sort of depict the United States as people are so separated and they're so far apart, until you go there and you realize that people are warm, people are welcoming. And I remember there is a coach at the University of Arizona, a shout out to Coach Pete Hughes, and he was telling me, Alan, let nobody fool you, we're just behaving because they're guests here. Hello and welcome to the first ever PFP Talks, that is Professional Fellows Program Talks. I am your host, Alan Hubbard, and joining me for this conversation is none other than Erick Sunday, who is, are you a 2023, how can I call it? In right about November, it's fall, and around May, it's spring.
Yes, it's
spring.
Yes,
Spring.
yes, he is a spring fellow from 2023, and we are joined with his mentor, Madam Kelly. We're going to be having this exciting conversation, sharing our experiences from the PFP, and also her sharing what she was able to see from the perspective of Sandy while he was in Alaska, and also what she's anticipating to get from her visit, or her outbound, basically, here in Nairobi. Without further ado, Kelly, kindly introduce yourself, probably full name, tell us a little bit about Alaska, and then we get it from there.
Sure thing. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Alan. Thank you for inviting us
Yes.
to speak with you on your show today.
Yes.
My name is Kelly Hartlieb. I am from Anchorage, Alaska, and I work at the Center for Human Development, which is affiliated with the University of Alaska in
Yes.
Anchorage. And so Alaska, we were just talking about Alaska. It's the 49th state of the United States, and it's unique in many ways. It is a place that not the majority of U.S. citizens have visited, and we are separated actually from the rest of the United States by Canada. So we're kind of set apart, and we have lots of unique characteristics about the state itself and the people who live there. We're known because we are close to the North Pole, and for our cold weather most of the time. Although we do have seasons that are warm in the summertime for a few months. But really, it's a land of extremes in many ways. Being so close to the North Pole, our daylight and our nighttime hours change with the seasons. Our temperatures are extreme. The scenery is magnificent, majestic mountains, lots of ocean. We're surrounded by ocean on three sides. And so, we have lots of beautiful scenery, and was very happy and fortunate to host Erick when he was assigned to come to Alaska as a professional fellow. And so,
I think Erica will snitch on you, and he told me that when he was sharing with his friends that he was being posted at Alaska, everybody was asking him, what the hell are you going to see in Alaska? Probably, Eric, you could also introduce yourself and tell us probably what did you make of Alaska?
My name is Erick Sunday. I'm currently working at United Disabled Persons of Kenya, UDPK. UDPK is an organization of OPDs in Kenya, working to push for the rights of persons with disabilities, particularly in the areas of policy space. So I was fortunate enough to go to Alaska. And many years back, when I was still in primary school, we used to, learn about some areas, some part of the world that, has maybe longer days and fewer, nights.
Yeah.
Some place which is, far away, somewhere in the corner of the world. And so I would say it was fascinating for me to go there. And it also opened, doors for me, because each time I mentioned to someone that I went to the US,
Yeah.
and they'll be like, where? And so I would jump in and say, Alaska, and like,
Yeah.
oh, really?
Yeah.
So I would say for me, it was a blessing in
Disguise.
disguise,
Yeah.
for me. It opened doors and also conversation for me. Yeah, and I have to say that I'm a proud alumni of PFP, and also having gone to Alaska.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and probably this is a question that would maybe might pose to the PFP team. Probably, why don't they post guys to Los Angeles, California? Because when you tell somebody that you went to the States, they'll be like, did you go to New York? No. Did you go to LA? No. Did you go to Las Vegas? No. They're like, then which kind of United States were you in? Yeah, I think it's quite fascinating. I know the PFP journey has this sort of a dual way of doing things. As we are preparing back home to come to the United States, also the mentors that we are posted with, they are preparing to host us at their particular universities. Probably let me start with you, Kelly. When, because we spoke before we started this conversation that Eric was your first host, was your first mentee to host.
Right.
How was the preparation process for you? Were you excited? Were you like, okay, how is this person going to be like? The
Yeah.
cultural differences.
Yes. I was interested in, obviously reading Erick's bio and
Yeah.
the information that the program provided us. One of the things, I should say that our university was really fortunate because we were able to host two PFP folks. And so also a woman, Clara from Tanzania, came to Anchorage at the same time as Eric.
Yeah.
And as we were looking at, the bios of the fellows who are coming over, we were like, this person's experience might align with mine more than, our
Yeah.
other host. And so right away, one of the things that intrigued me about Erick's bio was his interest in policy and political systems.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, we really share that passion and that interest. We both are political science majors in universities. So
Yeah.
I thought, oh, we're going to have interesting conversations. And I was very right about that.
Yeah.
I also went to YouTube
Yeah.
and I started trying to, watch videos so that I could kind of get a sense of, okay, so what do folks like to eat in Kenya?
Yeah.
What are some customs that I might become familiar with before before he comes?
Yeah.
What should I be prepared to, make adjustments for? And so my first video I watched was people walking around the streets of Mombasa. And so I was like, wow, okay. So I'm like, oh, a lot of that food feels really similar to what we can cook here. We like to eat here.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until a few weeks later, I watched some videos about Nairobi and, oh, these are very different cities
Yeah.
and tastes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I tried to learn, about different aspects of Kenyan culture that way
Yeah.
before Eric came. But still, we, it took us just working through kind of day-to-day, conversations about what things work and just,
Yeah.
kind of, we didn't have a lot of problems to solve.
Yeah.
It was just, trying to make small adjustments here and there.
Yeah.
So one of the things that was interesting is I'm generally a vegetarian, although I do eat fish, so but not technically.
Yeah.
And Eric is generally a person that eats meat.
Mm.
And so,
Yeah.
we made it work.
Interesting, and I think Eric, on your end, probably your sharing will also be interesting, because the moment you get that email, congratulations, we are pleased to tell you, we are pleased to inform you, and then you're like, okay, this all started like a joke. Now we are here. Did you use Kelly's strategy? Go read about Alaska, search for them on YouTube. Because I would agree with Kelly. I did the same thing. Yeah. What do people in Tucson do? And then I got to learn that there are these cactus trees. Yeah. People walk probably with the sleevelesses so that they can cool off the weather and all of that. Quite an interesting journey to find out information. Yeah. Sunday, for you, how was it?
Yeah, so for me also, it was quite fascinating for me, because first and foremost, it was my first time to apply for it.
Yeah.
And it didn't cross my mind that I might be
Selected.
Yes.
Yeah.
And by the time I was getting that email, I was the only Kenyan who was selected to go for PFP. And by that time, I knew I could be posted to Boston, because it was being led by an institute in Boston.
Yeah.
So I started, also connecting with Boston, because we've also had our finest marathoners, going to Boston.
Marathon.
Yes,
Yeah.
Marathon. So like Kelly, I went to the also online, looking at what is there in Boston and others. So later on is when now I also now got to learn that I'll actually be going to Alaska.
Yeah.
And so I also went to YouTube, looking what is there in Alaska, and learning that they are actually paid, to live there. So that was very nice.
Kelly, you're not paid to live in Alaska.
It's true. Yes.
Okay.
So thoughts came into me that maybe I might also be paid.
You always look for something that makes you understand, okay, I'm not in Boston, I'm not in a big city, but I will find it bearable living there. Yeah.
So that was now my journey to Alaska. And I have to say, I was very fortunate, because being that I was the only Kenyan, and it was my first time. So I was very fortunate, and I thank that also to the US Department of State, which is the sole funder of this PFP.
Yeah. I think it's quite interesting, because the experience you just shared there, I think I also had the same thing. When you get the first email that sort of congratulates you to be selected and all of this, you're like, I'm going to Boston. Then you start searching, what are the best things that I can do in Boston? Then you start searching MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and you're like, okay, I'm going to be in this suburban sort of setting. Yeah, how am I going to behave? And then you're like, okay, now it's time to pair you with a mentor. Yeah, and then you learn your mentor is from Tucson, Arizona, and you're like, I've never heard about that place. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, I've never been to the States, so humble down. Arizona is in the States, so it's okay. It's okay. Now, change of tactic. What do people do in Arizona and all of that? And as you're thinking about this, and you're like, probably it would have been more exciting when I'm in a bigger city as compared to a smaller city. But when you get there, and the warmth that you get from people, the welcomeness, everything sort of just changes in your mind, and you're like, okay, not as bad as I thought, yeah. Because I remember when we touched down, uh, when we touched down in Tucson, we went to a tailgate that was proceeding to a football camp, and we're like, oh my goodness, we were so tired, but we're like, there is no way we're going to miss American football at university football, basically. So we went to tailgate, we ate this meat, we got to engage with people, we actually just dived deep into everything, and we went watched American football. I was watching American football for the very first time live, and I'm seeing these guys kicking a ball, but I got bored of it, but I was like, okay, at least I've gotten to see it with my eyes, yeah. So it was quite fascinating. My next question, or our next conversation, would revolve around culture. Yeah, first you saw Mombasa, then you like Nairobi, but then Sunday is more situated in the rural area because that's where he works.
Right.
Then probably you might not have gotten a proper perspective of how exactly Sunday is. The culture differences. How did you all deal with those and the culture shocks?
Well, I could start. Maybe Erick's story will be more interesting. I've only
Yeah,
been here a few days still.
yeah,
So I'm still absorbing everything. But I have had the benefit of serving in the U.S. Peace Corps,
yeah.
where I live. They sent me to Cote d'Ivoire, and I lived in a very remote village in that country for a while. So I had some sense of, some general cultural aspects of living in or being in Africa. So I had that to my advantage. And I am just so thrilled to be back on the continent and to be able to explore a different country and to learn all about the customs and the history and political systems here. It's just been really kind of an opportunity of a lifetime for me as well. Thanks to the U.S. State Department
Yeah.
for this opportunity. So there may be more to come, but so far things have felt, relatively familiar to me.
Yeah.
And I was really excited to apply for the outbound program, knowing that I might have an opportunity to come back to Africa. And so, right, I feel really, really lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite interesting. I'm really excited to hear from Sunday because there might be some similarities with PFP fellows who might be listening to this on their culture shocks that they found in the States.
Yeah. Well, for me, I will begin first and foremost maybe by the climate. I was shocked also by the climate that I will see, there is a sunlight, but now the air is cold, for me. So I would say, how is that possible?
Which kind of geography is this?
Yeah. And then also their food. I realized that most of the American food has some bread in it. Everything has bread, be it burger,
Bread.
pizza,
Yeah.
pizza, bread, sandwiches.
Yeah.
So that was also some also culture shock for me, and also the kind of perception that I went there is that the US has some this individualized culture, but when I landed in Alaska, it was different because everyone was welcoming, and they wanted for me to have a conversation with them, going to their places. So I got a sense of communalism, community wise, unlike I had thought or seen in the movies. So for me, that was also a cultural shock. And then in terms of disability, what I saw in the US was that they even had, plans for the for the generation that is not yet born. I would call it inclusion for the unborn child, and that for me was fascinating because the way I used to look at it is that we were only pushing for the rights of persons with the disabilities that are already there. We are saying that this person doesn't maybe have wheelchair, blah blah blah. But now in the US, they were even planning now for the person that isn't there, and for me that was a cultural shock also for me. Yeah.
I think they're on the food, hands down, because I even got this where the PFP has this sort of setting where it collects all the fellows who have gone for a particular cohort and they meet on a particular day and they just share their experiences. And you would hear everybody say, yeah, it's fascinating. Everybody, food here is rather interesting. And I think the one that I would not be castigated for sharing is eating vegetables and sandwiches, and you'd hear people say or share in the groups, and they're like, I was called for lunch and I thought I was going to eat some proper meat, I was going to eat some proper chicken, but we're having bread, we're having these vegetables and lettuce, and they're wondering which kind of lunch is this. So I think that's one of the biggest culture shocks that that people get when they get to the States. But I also like to agree with Zander where he said that the movies sort of depict the United States as people are so separated and they're so far apart, until you go there and you realize that people are warm, people are welcoming. And I remember there is a coach at the University of Arizona, a shout out to Coach Pete Hughes, and he was telling me, Alan, let nobody fool you. We're just behaving because they're guests here. But I found that really fascinating. And Sunday, you spoke about disability and the Americans being able to even plan for the unborn child just as yet. From a broader perspective, what did you think about the journey of disability inclusion in the United States, but also now coming with a perspective of what you had seen home and what you've grown up seeing, and then seeing something totally different? Could you paint a picture, both pictures, and what this now, when you're coming back to Kenya? Because when we come back, we're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to change the world. When you get back here, you realize, okay, back in the same place.
So the journey that I will say that I can compare between now the US and Kenya is that first and foremost, the challenges that we are facing as a disability community in Kenya are not so much different from the challenges that are faced by persons with the disabilities in the US. Because ranging from the accessibility challenges, discrimination challenges, the US movement, looking at people like Judy Human, the challenges they went through back in the years, I would say are the same challenges that we going through in Kenya. Buildings were not accessible, people were being discriminated at work. Inclusion of persons with the disabilities in the education sector, that was also some of the major challenges in the US back then. So it has also been a bumpy road, back in the US, because when I went there, what I had in mind was that maybe it was not that bumpy for Americans with the disabilities, but I also saw even in Alaska, persons with the disabilities pushing for their rights, even going to their capital, voicing their voice that this is what we are facing and this is what we would like it to be, addressed. So looking that now, bringing that now to Kenya, um, um, I I I thought to myself that these are the same challenges that we are also facing here in Kenya. Though now the way now we are looking at now the s- solutions was now where it was a bit different because we are more focused in pushing for the solutions kind of in silos, which was a bit now different in the US, that they could rally, their voices together as a disability movement, where they could even, face the government, agencies together as a disability, voices. So for us here, we are still on a journey to make sure that we rally that, support from all different communities of persons with the disabilities in Kenya, to make sure that we have that, unified voice to address issues to do with the barriers that we are facing as a, community. So that is what I would highlight. Yeah.
And Kelly, probably just as Sunday is saying, when you are sort of retracted from the entire picture, like it all looks rosy and merry, probably what are some of the things that you would share about the movement that probably would paint a clear picture of somebody who has not yet had the opportunity to go to the States, to sort of show how the movement has been able to evolve?
Yeah, so I think, maybe on a surface level, looking around, there are some clear signs of progress with different, accessibility features that may be more prevalent in the United States than here, for example. I remember when we went it's a national organization called the ARC, that works with people with intellectual disabilities, our chapter in Anchorage. And one of the things that you will see in our community, for example, are buses that are specifically designed to transport people with disabilities. And so when we went there and Eric and Clara both saw them, they went, wow, wow,
Yeah.
I remember that. And so, we can point to things like that, that are, things that, show progress in certain aspects, that, like we have an act that mandates that buildings and places, physical spaces, are accessible to people, but there's still a long way to go, even though you can point to things and say, wow, we have the ability to have doors that can automatically open, for example. That's common. But again, there's still a long ways to go with, providing full inclusion. And I would say one of the areas that needs a lot of attention still, and Eric, you mentioned, kind of we have a history of severe oppression against people with disabilities in our society in the US, institutionalization and, just really isolating people with disabilities. And that's changing slowly. But really, I think we have a long ways to go to help people think in terms that are not ableist, and assuming that, that folks have, the not assuming that that might be some accommodation needs for people, but instead designing things that without that awareness. And so that's a barrier that still exists, and that we're doing constant education in my work to help people think of in more terms of universal design and the needs of people with a wide spectrum of disabilities. So yeah, when you kind of look under the surface, like anywhere, you know, you can kind of you can tell that wow, there has been progress made,
Yeah.
but in terms of equal human rights to access to all aspects of society, there's still a long way to go.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I want to add on that. What I also saw in the US is that issues to do with disabilities is actually mainstreamed in all sectors. And I want to highlight this because back here, even in terms of budgeting, you would realize that we have only cornered the disability, programming only in one sector. And what we are saying is that we are calling to have issues with the disabilities in Kenya, to be mainstreamed in a health sector, education sector,
Yeah.
agricultural sector, because we have, members of the disability, community farming, So what the comparison I will also say is that we are a bit, behind in terms of mainstreaming the issues of disabilities in all sectors that might be in the community. Yeah.
Kelly, given that you are really interested in this aspect of policy, I would then pose sort of a trick question to you. Whose responsibility is it? Is it the government's responsibility, or the policymakers, or is it the organizations of persons with disabilities to advocate for this? Because what Sandy is saying is indeed true, but then we sort of fail to understand from a DPO level in our country, whose responsibility is it? And if the DPOs with OP or OPDs, depending on from what angle you would want to call it from, whose responsibility is it? Or who is most best placed actually to achieve this?
Well, I think both have a role. One of the things that most impressed me when Eric and I, got to know each other and started talking about these things was how progressive the Kenyan Constitution is in, mandating inclusion for people with disabilities in lots of different aspects. To have that actually embedded in your constitution is quite impressive.
Yeah.
And both Kenya and the U.S. have acts that inform the culture about different aspects of accessibility that need to be planned for and provided for. So I think that having the government officials say this sector of our population is important and deserving, as everybody is, of equal access and consideration, that means a lot in terms of educating the public at large. I think that's the role for agencies. And I think there's a lot of work to do still in terms of, I think that the general citizen, if they don't live with a disability or know someone closely, that has a disability, they're not really, that's not entering their conscious very much. They're kind of unconsciously ableist, right?
Yeah.
And so helping to shed light on different aspects of how folks with disabilities experience barriers is something, the work that we engage in on a regular basis, and advocating, making space and pathways for people with disabilities themselves to tell their story and to demand the accommodations that the government says are important, but it still takes people to show up
Yeah.
and to speak up and to speak out and to educate the folks that we interact with medical professionals, for example. This will still have a long way to go to really maybe understanding some, strategies for working effectively with folks with different disabilities and providing accommodations. Educators, the educational system. So I think both are important, but they need to work in,
Collaboratively.
yes, exactly, in, arm in arm with each other.
Yeah, I think Sunday now. This is where I would ask you, what is your follow-on project about? Because we might be discussing it entirely, and you have a solution in your follow-on project.
Yeah.
Um,
So my project is about inclusion of persons with disabilities, and particularly our target is OPDs in the budget making process in Kenya. And I will align this to the theme of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which is really a rally call to make sure that we deepen inclusion of issues of disability issues, and is a call for and with and by persons with disabilities.
Disabilities.
So really, we are looking to make sure that it is a responsibility of the whole, community to make sure that the priorities of persons with disabilities are identified and anchored in the budget, because we know the major area where where persons with disabilities are excluded from is right in the budget making, and we know that nothing can be addressed in the state, both at the national level and at the sub-national level, if it is not anchored in the budget. And many of the challenges that we have as a community, we try to address these challenges if they are highlighted and they are made a priority in the budget. So for example, I will give maybe of a county which has about 8 billion budget for the financial year, and you'll realize that of the 8 billion, you can only get about 100 million allocated to programs to deal with disability. Now, when you narrow that now down, comparing now to the total budget, you will find that it does not even add up to 1% of that total budget. So what then this means is that the sub-national level is continues now to sideline now persons with the disabilities within that community.
Yeah.
So what our follow-on project is looking at is to make sure that organizations of persons with the disabilities are made aware that there's a need to participate in the budget making process if we are to address some of the pertinent issues facing the community of persons with the disabilities.
And then Kelly, because you are his mentor, then and also now there is the learning that happened in the 5 weeks period while he was in the States. Now you have an extra 2 weeks to add on to that. How instrumental then are you going to be in him delivering that in his follow-on project?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I would say, in terms of labels of, mentor, I would say that Eric and I are equals and has a reciprocal exchange
Yeah.
in the learning process
Yeah.
and the discovery process. And so, my role, I feel, is to support Eric in his project. It's a really important project, and Eric is a really brilliant guy.
Yeah.
And we have had lots of conversations about what could help bring awareness and credibility to his project, which is the Shariki Project,
Yeah.
which aims at training OPD leaders to understand the budget process and to gain some strategies in order to meaningfully participate in the budget making process. My role is to be a part of that training. There's going to be specific facilitators to address educating about your Kenyan budget process.
Yeah.
I will add some perspectives about, what inclusion looks like from a U.S. perspective, and also some strategies from the U.S. perspective, maybe the disability rights movement that have been affected when, as Eric was saying, it's been a long struggle in the U.S. That, to gain more rights along the way has really happened because people have petitioned their elected leaders and really spoke up and really delivered their message in a cogent and really provocative way, so that it gets people's attention.
Yeah.
And so I can shed some light on that perspective and from the historical, kind of story of the disability rights movement in the U.S. And maybe it's inspirational. I hope that there's some practical strategies. I know that there's some differences in our political systems and our resources and things of that nature, but really helping to empower people with disabilities with the idea that they can make a difference. We need to be noisy sometimes, right? Americans are good at that.
Yeah.
And so in whatever that means in the Kenyan context, to maybe adapt some of those strategies so that they can be more effective in their self-advocating as they go forward. So
Yeah.
that's what I hope to deliver.
Quite interesting, and I totally agree with you. Sometimes it's supposed to be very noisy, but I think in the United States you take it a little bit a notch higher, where you also go ahead and sue institutions that are not giving services as they're supposed to be delivered. But here in the country, I think the only time we get to sue institutions is during the electioneering periods, when persons with disabilities probably their victories from political processes are snatched away and they feel aggrieved, and that's the only time that you would hear a person with a disability has sued somebody because they took something away from them. And I think just another one or two cases against an employer who a person with a disability felt that they were dismissed unfairly. But we have not had so many as compared to the United States, where I had they sue literally everything and anything, including the disability space. So I think that is very fascinating. We are close to an hour into this conversation, and as a closing habit into PFP talks, we're gonna do fire questions.
Okay.
And I remember, Kelly, you had a fire question that you wanted to ask initially, so probably we could start with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had posed the question to both of you as alumni of the PFP. If you had been given the option of selecting which state you would choose to go to before you came, which one would you have selected and why?
I'll let Sunday go first.
Well, I will go first, and I will say that I had never been to the US before, and what I was following, in the US, and particularly for me, what was more popular there was uh, Washington DC,
Yeah.
and I actually didn't know that it is not a state. Yeah,
It is the
so
political sort of
yeah. So for me, the first thing that would have come to my mind is I want to go to Washington DC.
Yeah.
So and the state that maybe I would have chosen is New York.
Okay.
New York,
Okay.
because I have seen, lots of movies revolving around,
Yeah.
New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will have gone for that.
The big city.
Yeah.
Okay, now I feel bad that I let Sunday go first because because he said exactly what I wanted to say. And fascinatingly, I never knew that I would ever have the opportunity to go to the United States, but I have a journal that I've written cities that I would want to go to before God does his thing. And New York was one of them. Yeah, so definitely I agree with Sunday. If I had a choice to choose, I would have definitely gone to New York. There is this depiction that we get from the media of New York. It is the business hub. It is life is fast paced. Everybody is thinking about Wall Street. Yeah, everybody's thinking about the money. So New York would be my first choose, and I think it would even be more amazing if I'm in New York and then I'm with my mentor Amanda in New York, because she was such open-minded. And I like when you say that you do not look at your relationship with Sunday as a mentor-mentee, but sort of colleagues, that everybody brings something to the table. Something that Dr. Amanda Cross told me, that Alan, whatever activity I send you into, do not look at yourself as if you are sort of lesser. Yes, they might have more information than you, but in their own perspective and in their own jurisdiction as well. You have a lot of information in your own perspective and in your own jurisdiction.
Absolutely.
So when you bring this together, you are all equals to some extent, because everybody is bringing value to the table. Yeah, and I found that a very fascinating. If you had a choice, and Sunday was not your mentee or was not your colleague,
Yeah.
where would have you chosen to go in Africa?
Honestly, Kenya would have been because, as I said, I have spent some time in West Africa.
Yeah.
And I have, maybe Kenya is like the Alaska of the United States in
Yeah.
terms of big animals and beautiful scenery,
Yeah.
warm hospitality. And so just really always wanted to spend time in this part of the continent. And, Kenya's just kind of has had intrigue for me.
Yeah.
And so glad to spend time. As a matter of fact, maybe similar to other universities,
Yeah.
University of Alaska has a very good cross-country running team, which is comprised majorly of Kenyan exchange students.
Yeah.
So they're kind of superstars at our university often, and I lucked out. I got my first pick.
And for me, knowing what I know now,
Yeah.
and I will choose to go to Alaska.
Any day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also go back to Tucson. I would also go back to Tucson, because the people that you meet there and the connections that you make onto campus, the students, the conversations that you have with people, you're like, okay, probably this is the best place that I could have ever chosen to be. But also not negating that if we might have been posted in different institutions, probably that is the same feeling that we would have forgotten. As we're winding up, a last word.
My last word is that, and I always say this, that in everything that we do,
Yeah.
we must ask who is missing, because we are all championing for inclusion of
Yeah.
all persons with disabilities, and the spirit is not to leave anyone behind.
Yeah.
So for me, the pertinent question to ask is who is missing, and where are they, and what can we do? Yeah. Thank you.
For me, a last word or thought is I'm kind of all about helping people to form the habit of asking people, everyone, regardless of if they have an apparent disability or not, about what their accommodation needs are to be able to participate meaningfully and fully in any interaction. So if it's a medical interaction, if it's just us visiting right now, well, beforehand or during the interaction, asking every single person, what can we change in the environment, or what do you need so that your needs are met and you can participate with your best self, and knowing that many disabilities are invisible. I think it's just good practice
Yeah.
to make that ask of everybody that we encounter when we're engaging with them. So to kind of, again, to overcome that tendency toward ableist thinking and just make that a practice for all humans.
Yeah, quite interesting. I do not have anything to add or subtract from that. I
Okay.
think I will leave it at that. And I would like to thank you guys for making time for coming to the studio and all the exciting conversations that we've had. Kelly, I hope you have a wonderful time and stay here in Nairobi, and as you also plan to go to the rural part of the country. And yeah, the thing that I always pray for is, when you come back from the States, you sort of are still in contact because the experiences are still fresh. But as time goes by, things sort of start going back to normal. You start going out of contact. But if only we could keep these contacts. We never know what we can always make out of these relationships that we get to build. Yeah.
Right.
All right. And that is the end of the first ever episode of PFP Talks. And I hope you who is listening, when you become a PFP fellow, you'll also come onto this platform and we have a similar conversation. Thanks for listening.